Welcome into Campo and Joe. It's a great conversation every single week when I get to catch up with my good friend Dave Campo, former Dallas Cowboy head coach, longtime assistant in the National Football League and the college game. How you doing?
I'm doing great. This is an exciting week because, when you've been in it as long as I have, and of course you've been on the media, number of drafts,
Yeah.
but haven't been involved in it, and it's an exciting week. It's exciting for the teams because obviously they're trying to get better and get quality players, but it's also really exciting for the players. I'm excited for them.
Right.
It's a big day. Some disappointed, but majority of them excited about just having an opportunity to go
Oh
forward
my
in the
gosh,
business.
they're going to be cashing checks, playing the sport that they love. Now on XL Primetime, noon to 3, Monday through Friday on 1010XL. We always appreciate everybody tuning into that. We bring Coach in weekly, but you and I are going to spend a little more time kind of drilling down on some of the specifics of this draft, a few prospects that we can throw at Jaguar fans out there, but then also from your perspective, it's like, I think we might have even said this on the show. I'll repeat it here. There isn't anybody else around us that has been in a war room like you have. You have been in the war room. We always talk about it. How about you telling us a little bit more about how it all unfolds? Because you got a big draft board, you got a lot of decisions to make. How about you take the approach of draft week and give us a little bit of an idea of what's going on, what's unfolding?
Well, draft week, first of all, there's been a lot of work done already. A lot of these scouts have seen these players for 2 years, and they have meetings. We had meetings where you went through every single player that was available in the draft,
Right.
and graded them, ranked them. The coaches have looked at them. So going into the last week, there's been a ton of work, and the draft board is up. As far as how they've ranked these guys, and how that's done is based on a bunch of different opinions, grades that people have put together,
Right.
whether it's regional scouts, national scout, different position guys are assigned to different positions. For example, if there was a DB in another area, a guy that's kind of specifically a DB guy would have looked at that guy and put a grade on him. So all these grades have been put together and up on the board, and there's a ranking from 1 to whatever through the 7 rounds, and preferred free agents even beyond that.
Okay.
So that's there as you go into your last week. Then the last week is really basically a accumulation of mock drafts. You have 32 guys in a room, scouts, coaches, personnel people. They all have a team. They have the strengths and weaknesses, and that's been studied by the people in the organization.
Right.
And you run a mock draft, and at certain times you throw a trade in there. It gives the decision makers an idea of how it's going to go down, having to make decisions based on trades.
On the
Now
fly.
all of a sudden, on the fly, you have to look at what's on the board. You have to rearrange your board a little bit and go from there. So this week, the first couple days are probably mock draft situations, and then the decision makers are together on their own, whether that's the general manager, the owner, the head coach, the scouting director, or in the case of the Cowboys, in the day and age, the owner and the GM were the same guy, Jerry Jones. They go through, they look at the board. It's a constant massage of what they hear. They're talking to people on the phone about possible trade scenarios. All those things are going on this week.
Okay, so take me there real quick, because we on the outside, we certainly hear from people, the Adam Schefters, the Ian Rappaports of the world. We talk to as many people as we can. We get a little bit of a feel as to what might be happening. But can you at least paint a picture of what is happening on the inside with GMs picking up phones? Like, how aggressive are teams to find out what the other team is thinking?
Well, they're constant. I think there's conversations amongst teams. The organization has a pretty good idea of those guys that might be interested in moving. That's kind of through word of mouth and rumors, whatever. And so, those teams you're constantly talking to about, hey, look, if anything comes up, make sure you let us know. We're interested in possibly moving. We may stay. It's got to be the right situation. So, there's conversations between scouting directors. There's conversations between, GMs. That's going on during towards the end of the lead up to the draft on a pretty good basis.
All right, so let's at least hit a couple of things that we know have already happened, and maybe you pull out that Campo crystal ball and you give us an idea of what you think might happen. If you think there are going to be maybe some trades Thursday night, first round of the draft. We've already seen San Francisco with Miami trade. They get up to that number 3 spot. Miami backs out to number 12. And then within an hour, maybe even a half an hour, Miami jumps back in with Philadelphia, which I'm sure, as you just described, that was orchestrated beforehand. Basically, they said, if we do this deal with San Francisco, we're going to pick up the phone and call you, and we're going to make that other deal. And so San Francisco's made a move, Miami's made a move, Philadelphia's traded back, Kansas City traded with Baltimore to get Orlando Brown. I think those are the 4 that we're looking at right now. How many more do you think will happen?
Well, normally there's not a lot of trades on draft day. If you look at it from a historical perspective,
it seems like more and more of late, but you are right.
And again, I think there's more of a liberal NFL today than there used to be. So, but back in the day, there weren't many trades. But at the same time, I don't know that it's general knowledge of the fan, of the general public, that very few draft boards have more than about 16 guys with a number 1 grade, first round grade on guys.
That is very,
which is surprising to many people.
Yeah.
So when you talk about from number 17 on, to maybe the middle of the second round, they're very similar grades on people. So if you have a specific guy that you want, and you've got the firepower, and you have a chance, there's a chance that you will move up, into that top 16, because in the minds of the organization, those 16 guys are can't miss.
All right, so just take me there real quick. Why is there such a drop-off if it's a 32 picks in the first round? Is it true only half of them would have a, quote, first-round grade?
Yeah, and again, it might be 20 for some
right.
team. It might be 21.
Depending on the draft, yes.
But, really it comes down to the accumulation of all the grades that are put together with the scouts and the decision makers, all those grades, the coaches, conservative. People are conservative in those grades because, number one, their jobs are on the line based on how they, evaluate a guy.
Yeah.
And so,
you can't go over the top.
Yeah, they're not going to go over the top necessarily on a guy. So when the grades are all accumulated and put together, and however they put them together, whether it's an average or whatever of the grades, some of them are going to be below that first round grade, and they're not going to manufacture a guy into the first round. Yeah. That's what you're talking about when you start reaching for players.
Yeah. Car salesman may want to upsell, real estate guy may want to upsell, but your job is on the line if you upsell this guy. Because if you're trying to convince a GM or a head coach to go ahead and draft a guy in the first round and he's not first round material,
right,
your butt's on the line.
And a lot of it is trust. The one thing when we went to the Dallas Cowboys, Coach Johnson, he didn't know the scouts. He didn't know Dick Mansberger, who was the director of player personnel. Okay. So he trusted the coaches' grades sometimes more than the scouts. Now, when you look over time, the scouts see guys for 2 years, whereas the coaches maybe watch 3 or 4 games on a guy.
True.
So a lot of times the coaches might have higher grades on a guy because they don't know the whole story.
Right,
they don't know the whole picture.
Right, they saw a good tape. All right, so take the Jimmy Johnson example to the Urban Meyer world that we're in right now with the Jaguars. he may not know that scouting staff very well. I would guess that he didn't. He hired 30 coaches. I don't know if he changed too many people in the scouting department. So how do you think he's approaching it?
I think he's going to rely on the coaches more than most teams, and I also
At
believe
least
that
for right now, right?
yes. Oh yeah. In other words, you're going to make decisions. There may be some scouts next year that are not part of the ball club.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important that they hit the guys correct on that grading system. But also, that's one of the reasons that Trent Baalke is still there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because Trent has been doing this for a long time, and he's seen a lot of players, and he knows the scouting staff, and he knows which ones to really, if one gets on the table, you believe that guy. Whereas another one, well, he's pretty good with DBs, but he's not great with running backs. So there's a lot of that going on in that organization right now.
It's funny, I looked at the Jaguars press release, and one of the things that immediately struck me is that Urban is considered, a guy that's going to be very aggressive in his way of thinking. And one of the things that he's put out there is that he wants that defensive line to be among the top 25% in the NFL. He thinks that's where you're going to win football games, that along with the offensive line. Out of the press release from the Jaguars, Trent Baalke has drafted more defensive linemen than anybody else.
That's
two minds
interesting.
thinking
I
alike.
didn't see that,
Yeah.
and that's interesting to me because, really, in all honesty, Urban's going to be listening to Baalke.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's going to listen to him because of his familiarity with everything that has gone on in that organization
Right.
and in organizations that he's been in, and he's a NFL football guy.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's going to be part of the decision making. I guarantee you. But he's going to put his stamp on it. I promise you. He's too strong a personality guy to just let somebody else make his picks for him.
Now, as we do this Campo and Joe podcast, you also heard some of the comments from Urban Meyer on one of the podcasts he did, just about how tough it's going to be for him not to look at the draft board, particularly in the first round. When you talk about those first round grades, meaning the top half of the first round, there's really good stock in those players. And Herb said he's going to have to fight the urge to wanting to give away draft capital to get one of those guys, because he's got to be smart in the long-term planning of his football team.
And that's why he really, when I look at a draft, if I'm a really good football team, and there's really only a few of those,
Mm-hmm.
you say, well, maybe there's 8. No, there's not. There's really probably 4 or 5 that are pretty solid at
Mm-hmm.
positions all the way through.
Right.
When a team is like that, you can pick for need, because you've got the surrounding cast
Exactly.
that can handle all the different situations.
Right. You've checked a bunch of boxes.
But when you're not a really good football team or an average football team, you really have to go by your board. Now, when your board and a need corresponds,
Mm-hmm.
you make the need pick.
Okay.
So, I think that Urban's probably going to be a guy that's a little excitable about
Yes. I
getting
think
the
that's-
best guy, because he's done that, for his whole career.
He-
But at the same time, he's smart.
Right.
And he's talked to Jimmy Johnson a number of times, and he's talked to people that have done this, that you can't necessarily do that. You have to go looking at what's going to happen next year, the year after, and the year after that. Who's coming up in contracts with the team.
Exactly.
You have to fill your roster with guys that you think can play. It's not just about putting one guy on there that can make you better this year.
You made me think of one thing, because with expiring contracts, good players you don't want to let go of, but also good players can become a little too pricey. We know that it happens. And you just made me think of something, that if Urban can at the very least take a look at the way he recruited in the college game, to where he knew that it was constantly going to be turning over the roster from this guy's here for 3 years and he's off to the NFL. This guy's here for 3 years and he's off to the NFL. If he can at least look at it like that, certain players we got to keep, we got to allocate some good salary to them, but the other ones, I need to keep preparing for the next guy to step up and play that
Yeah,
position.
no question about it. And that's really the sometimes what happens is that's why you don't see dynasties necessarily, because you keep players too long because of
Yeah, they're
you
fan
like them.
favorites. Exactly.
And they're good guys. Coach Landry, as great a coach as he was, that's what happened to that football team at the end. and Jerry had a tendency to do that. He loves the players. He loves, he gets attached to them.
Sure.
If you're really good, which I believe Urban will be, is you have to plan for the future, and you have to look at it from that standpoint going forward.
All right, the Jaguars have been all over the map when it comes to drafting players. They picked in they picked in every spot in the top 10 now that they are going to pick number 1. How important is it, Coach? They will now have had 4 drafts in their entire franchise existence since 1995, where they have 2 first-round draft picks in each of those drafts. They did it in 95 when Tom Coughlin was considered Trader Tom. He traded back in to get James Stewart in the first round along with Tony Pacelli. And then he did it a couple of years later and was able to haul in, after trading Rob Johnson away, he was able to haul in Fred Taylor and Donovan Darius. So they did that in 95, they did that in 98. That was a 4-year gap. And then they're going to do it again in consecutive years here with last year's C.J. Henderson and Caleb on Chason, and then these 2 draft picks, number 1 and number 25. How crucial is it to make sure that you get these right? Because this doesn't happen very often.
No, and that's why it's so important. And I think when you mention those names,
that's good stuff.
Hopefully, last year was a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really think that both of those guys, Henderson and Chason, are talented.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives the Urban Meyer era
Mm-hmm.
a boost, because they're ahead of the game with having the group that they had last year, if they come through the way they should.
Yeah.
So, that's important that you hit 2 guys when you've got first-round picks. Again, when I say that you've got first-round grades on 16,
Mm-hmm.
but, let's say a 6.5 is a first-round grade,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the numerical system is,
Right.
there are some 6.4 9s and some 6.4 8s
Right.
and 6.4 7s that are in that next
Okay. That
10,
next pack. Okay.
whatever. And so you still have to get the best available player. And that's why if you move, most of the time you only move a few spots if you trade.
Okay.
A
So that
jump up,
Right.
to a top 4 or 5 or 6, you have to give up so much draft capital that it's not usually what you do.
Yeah, it does not make a lot of sense with the team as you correctly described. If you're a player or 2 away, you take that leap. If you've got a lot of big gaping holes, which this football team does, then you better be smart and fill some boxes. All right, so let's go ahead and fill some boxes right now. We know that Trevor's coming number 1. I'm sure at some point we'll get a full breakdown from you on him. But for now, we're just going to say Trevor. That's it. We don't need to say anything else. So let's take a look at a couple of position groups. And let's look at that 25th pick, but then let's go beyond that a little bit, because the guys that you throw out here are not necessarily all going to be that draft grade that you were just talking about. But let's go tight ends here to start, because I don't think any of your tight ends are worthy of that 25th pick. Are they?
No.
Okay, so
in my look at it, as I look at it.
Okay, so let's just go past the 25th, at least to get the tight end conversation going, because this football team needs to come out of this weekend with quality play at that tight end position.
Right. And here's how I look at it. A guy like Freiermuth from Penn State,
Mm-hmm.
the coaching staff knows him. That one of the tight end coach
Right.
coached him, recruited him,
Right.
brought him in. Young coach.
Yeah, Tyler Bowen, who's here now under Herb, coached Freiermuth at Penn State.
Right. So they know an awful lot about the guy. And what you're getting with Freiermuth is a solid player. He's a guy that's going to come in and he's going to help the football team
Mm-hmm.
at whether it's, to me, I look at it, he's at best number 45.
Right.
I don't think you do anything with him at 33. But what you've got with him is a guy that can run the seams of the defense. He's not really fast or sudden. He makes the breaks away from receivers pretty well with technique. He's a smart, tough kind of football player. He's a kind of a combination between a move tight end and a blocker.
I like hearing this.
And so the guy is a solid player. He's very reliable catching the football. He's going to find open areas, but he's not going to be a sudden run after catch
Mhm.
kind of a player.
Right.
That's what you're getting with him. So when you look at him, I look at him as possibly number 45.
Okay.
You know, in the second round, he is a second round player. There's no, in my mind, he's not a first round player, but he does give you some things as far as character, and those are the things that their tight end coach knows.
Yeah.
So he will stick out in that area.
I like him a lot, and I do think that where you're pointing at in the draft makes a lot of sense, the 45th pick overall. We threw out on XL Primetime earlier that, you know, Kyle Pitts, as rare as he is, it's very hard to be drafting a tight end that high. There have only been a couple of tight ends that have gone in the top 5 in the entire history of the draft.
Right.
That's a lot of years. And so you got to be smart, and I like the fact that you don't have a tight end grade that's 25th. Which means there's not a first-round tight end.
Right.
If you're betting in Vegas right now, Coach, the number over/under of tight ends drafted in the first round is 0.5.
Yeah.
Because they don't think anything, or excuse me, 1.5 beyond Kyle Pitts. There's anything,
Right.
you know, more than that. So if you have Freiermuth, which is a main need here, but you're not going to reach for that need, right? That's the smart play. So is there another guy that jumps out maybe a little bit later in the draft? If you don't, let's just say you don't get Freiermuth, or you think it's too expensive. Who else?
Brevin Jordan.
Okay, all right.
I like Brevin Jordan. I know that some people have Long graded above him.
And by the way, the one knock on Brevin Jordan is that he was just a little slow. Did not have a very fast 40 time, but Hunter Long is the other guy from Boston College. It could be.
Yeah, but
getting
when
some
you
love.
look at Brevin Jordan play football, he doesn't look slow to me. He's very
That's key.
sudden in his movements.
Mhm.
He's an athlete. He's a better athlete than Freiermuth is. If it just came down to who's going to play basketball, I guarantee you that Brevin Jordan will win in a basketball game. So athletically, he's what you're looking for.
Okay.
And he is a run after catch guy. He can he can move away from receivers. He can get people out of position. And that's why I think he almost, and he's a move type tight end. He's not going to be a blocker. And you've got the blockers. You've got Manhertz and O'Shaughnessy.
Exactly.
There's your blockers. To me, you're looking for an athlete, a guy that can move, can probably play fullback a little bit.
I'm looking at the breakdown. He showed up at Miami as a running back, and then
Yeah.
ultimately was moved into that tight end position because of the size.
Yeah, and athletic ability.
Yeah.
You know, that's who he is. And so, to me, if you're just looking at, if you were assured of getting him in the third round, what is it, 106? Is that
Yeah.
the third, or is it 65?
It's 65 to begin the third round, then 106
Yeah,
to start.
yeah.
the
If
fourth.
you're assured that you're going to get him at 65, I would definitely not take a tight end at
Okay.
45.
Okay, and so this goes to the other half of this. We're trying to put a team together, so we've got to make sure that you don't just fall in love with that speed. But it makes sense here because he's more of a move tight end when you already have Chris Manhertz signed as a free agent, considered a sixth offensive lineman. He is
Right.
that type of tight end. He is an inline blocker. And you could say the same thing about James O'Shaughnessy, although O'Shaughnessy can slip out and make
Yeah,
plays.
yep. He's a combination guy.
Yeah.
He's more of the Freiermuth, in my opinion.
So that means we almost may step away from Freiermuth.
Right. And
Okay.
the Freiermuth, again, now is going to upgrade. I mean, there's no doubt that he's a second-round talent. But he's just, to me, we have a couple guys that fit that mold. And you know, hopefully we can get one that's a move guy that can, you know, do a lot of different things.
All right, so let's talk running backs, because let's stay in the skill position world that we're in. And again, some of these, the tight end's not going to make it into that 25th spot, but there's a potential that maybe a running back could, or if you look at that 33rd pick overall, first pick in the second round Friday night, that you might go running back. Now, I simply say James Robinson has solidified himself as a starter, and you don't need to use these very expensive draft picks to go get depth. But if you go get somebody that's a change of pace back, then it might be worth it. Who do you like?
Well, first of all, Etienne.
Travis
You know,
Etienne is a good player.
You know, I think, you know, when you talk about the 33rd pick, that pick is going to be based on what happens at number 25.
Sure.
if you make a decision that you're going to get a kind of a special cat, let's say it's Tony, the receiver.
Okay.
If they made the decision, Barmore's not there,
Right.
and they have to go, there's nothing else they see there, and they think Tony is a guy that, and that's where he's going to fall. He's going to fall in that range right there.
Right.
And let's say they take Tony, then to me, you don't take the speed guy in the next pick. That's when you look for maybe a defensive lineman,
Okay.
or whatever the next chess piece is.
Right.
But Etienne now is a special cat, and he's a chess piece.
Especially playing in the backfield with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, he's a that kind of a guy. Whether it's Etienne or a guy like Gainwell, another kid that what's Gainwell, Tulsa, no, excuse me, Memphis. Those guys are explosive players. Those are the guys that you win football games with the ball in their hands.
And that's that second gear, third gear, high speed.
And suddenness.
Yeah.
Burst.
Which James Robinson.
Acceleration. He's not one of those guys. He's a steady every down. Again, I've said this before. He reminds me as a poor man's Emmitt Smith because he hasn't proven that he's Emmitt Smith yet.
Right.
But he's that type of a back. He's gonna be 4 yards, 5 yards. He's not gonna lose yardage. He's gonna gain yardage every time he carries the ball. Etienne and Gainwell are guys that are home run hitters. When they touch the ball, if you get them to a certain spot,
Right.
they're gone.
Okay, so would you consider that, even though I just said they've got a starter at running back, would you consider this in our new age NFL world another starter? A la Sean Payton when he had Alvin Kamara added to that Saints backfield, even though he had Mark Ingram.
Absolutely, that's what you're getting.
Okay.
You're getting a guy that's a special player, and Urban has talked a lot about having difference makers, guys with speed on the ball club, and I think he's talking about the entire ball club because that was the exact thoughts that Coach Johnson had when we came to the Cowboys, that the team had gotten old and slow.
Right.
And so, that was a major factor in what we were looking for.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. It didn't matter what position we're talking about. They need to be fast. They need to hit you before you expect them, before they expect you to get there. The other one is Visca Chenault potentially. He's already on this football team. He was a pick in last year's draft class. You know him. You saw him when you were doing defensive analyst work for Southern Cal. But is he potentially that guy?
Yes, I think he's potentially that type of a guy as an outside receiver. I think he'll be
not
one
an
of the,
ETN where he could line up in different spots.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's Etienne is really a different cat in my opinion. He's a guy that is so explosive that he's a chess piece that you use wherever you use him. Chenault has a little bit of that, and I love Chenault. I think Chenault's going to get better and better and better, personally.
And is he more of a slot guy, or he could be an outside guy? Chenault.
Chenault to me is a combination guy. I think he can play in any of the spots.
So here's what I'm fighting with then, Coach, and this is the part that I can't quite figure out because I know that Herb wants to get better. I know he can't be content with what's already here, but if we look at Chenault being developed and coached better this year, that he could be a dynamic weapon, then I'm more inclined to go with ETN over, say, a Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, well, because he's got backfield, he's a back.
Exactly. Kadarius, for my money, they should already have in Visca Chenault, shouldn't they?
Right. And again, I don't think Chenault is a pure slot receiver. I think he's a combo receiver.
Okay.
Whereas Tony, in my opinion, is a slot receiver. The knock on Tony is off the field. And one of the things that we did with the Cowboys, which I thought paid dividends, the guys that we took that first draft were all guys that were academic, All-American type guys and were character players. And so that's going to hurt Tony, in my opinion, as compared to some other guys, I think, because of the reputation. Now, there's some study done. I mean, they know who they're getting most of the time.
And it easily could be in a player's rearview mirror where he was a knucklehead, did some dumb things. In the case of Kadarius Toney, he did have a run-in with the law where there was an open weapon in the car. Everything was cleared up after that. The other knock on him was a little injury prone, and then suddenly had this just unbelievable final year at Florida where he just took off. He stayed healthy and he was a better football player.
Right. And I have a son that when he was 5, 6, 7 years old, his nickname was Knuckle Sandwich, and he's turned into a pretty good kid.
Yeah.
So that can happen. There's no question
know.
about it.
Yeah, you never know. And we always tell stories. Oh gosh, what we got away with back in the day, and you can't help it. But so Fred Taylor's a great example. Fred Taylor got in trouble at Florida early, and then ultimately turned the corner. Never ever was a question or a problem. But these guys have to answer those questions when personnel people are asking them, "Hey, what's up? What's up with your past?" And so that's another guy that excites a lot of people, probably also worries a lot of people a little bit. All right, so who else do you have on your board as far as value picks? It could land in that 25th spot. I know you like the bigger defensive linemen, guys that can create pressure on the edge. Let's get back to those guys with that 25th selection overall.
Well, first of all, I think and this may be crazy, but I've heard, I know Hack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I listen to Hacker all the time. But if one of the offensive linemen drops, for example, Tevin Jenkins or Darrisaw, or the guys that are kind of the 16,
exactly
17, 18,
right in that little area
if they were to drop, you've got a guy at left tackle that is on a 1-year contract. And when you're looking at going forward, Jenkins is one of those guys that has a grade that you would say would be a starter eventually, which is within a 2-year period.
Right.
Well, if one of those guys dropped, I could see them taking an offensive tackle at that position because you win up front.
Right, and head coaches and GMs, that's their responsibility. You can't ignore that if a guy does drop. I'm just looking to see where he's being mocked right now, and he's certainly, like as an example, he's mocked 13th here as far as a prospect is concerned. You can't ignore that if he slips to 25. You're talking about a 6'4", 315-pound man. You can't. They don't walk the earth. There aren't that many of them.
Exactly. And now the thing about the offensive line is that you don't take an offensive lineman early unless it's one of those top 4.
Okay.
Because this is a deep draft. There are 16 offensive tackles that have a grade of not necessarily position-wise, but it goes, round-wise. But they have grades that say that they will be a starter within 2 years or better than that.
Yeah.
So you can get an offensive lineman down in the draft.
Okay.
But again, one of those top 16 guys, if one of them drops, you have to take a really good look at it, especially at left tackle, at cornerback, at quarterback,
Sure.
at, whatever the top positions are. Edge rusher, a guy like Ojolari or one of these guys that's graded up in that, second half
Pay
right
attention.
there.
Yeah.
If one of those guys drops, that's why you don't know in a mock draft whether or not, who you're going to pick or what's going to happen, because anything could happen there.
I want you to get to Ojolari because we do need to talk about the defensive end. We mentioned Christian Barmore. I want you to touch on him real quick, but also while we're on this subject, as far as the offensive line is concerned, the way this starting 5 is constructed right now, just for what it's worth, and we're going from left to right. Cam Robinson, 2nd-round draft pick. Andrew Norwell, undrafted free agent. Brandon Linder, 3rd-round draft pick. A.J. Cann, 3rd-round draft pick. Jawan Taylor, 2nd-round draft pick. There's not a first rounder among this bunch. A lot of people thought Jawan and Cam would be first rounders. They both slipped into the 2nd round. So it's not impossible that they would, if that guy fell, that they wouldn't look at that, because they do need to be thinking proactive on improving this offensive line going forward. They don't need to ignore that opportunity if it does present itself.
Yeah, and the reason I even bring that up is the fact that, I watched those two tackles all year. And
I'm a Cam supporter, but only because it's a known quantity.
correct. And really, to be honest with you, they were inconsistent, and they can always get better.
Yeah.
But I would lean more towards Taylor because he's got more years on his contract.
Right.
The left tackle has 1 year on his contract, so I think you have to be sure, unless if one of those guys drops.
Yeah, and I understand the finances. You can't ignore that left tackle position and let Cam Robinson walk without knowing what's in the draft. So they had to tag him.
They have no choice.
Yeah, and they couldn't even get into the free agency world. All right, so before we get out of here, you mentioned Ojulari, outside linebacker, D-end out of Georgia. He's only 6'2", he's 250 pounds. He certainly would be suited for the 3-4, I would think. But maybe hit a couple of these guys that you like.
Well, Ojulari, first of all, I think would be an outside rusher, not a defensive end.
Exactly.
And I think you have to, to me, you've got three defensive linemen. You've got the nose guard and the two defensive ends. And some people, a defensive end in a 4-3 is the outside guy. They're really not. It's the outside linebackers are the rush guys. And Ojulari would be one of those guys. When you say edge, you're talking about a guy that can rush the passer off the edge.
Yeah, we do need to be.
And there's two different guys. When I'm looking at a defensive end, I'm looking at 290, 280. An athlete that can rush the passer, but he's going to move down into the guards, and they're on the edge of the defense, but they're not the edge rushers.
Right.
So, Ojulari is an edge rusher, like Chason,
Exactly.
and Allen.
Josh Allen, I think, has to be that guy. He can't come up to the line of scrimmage, can he? Even though he could be 270, he can't come up to the line.
No.
Because that's what I was wondering about Jalen Phillips.
Yes.
Jalen Phillips is 270. Now, Josh Allen is fast and 270. Jalen Phillips, even though he ran well, tested well down at Miami, he's not the same guy, is
No, Jalen Phillips, and to me, he's a tweener.
Okay.
I think he's a 4-3, maybe a 4-3 defensive end or a 3 technique tackle.
Okay, so
but he's light.
Yeah.
He's light, but he's not fast enough to be that edge guy in a 3-4, a guy that's going to come off the edge.
Which is what Josh Allen is.
Yeah, so he's not quite physical enough to be the defensive end, and he's not fast enough to be the edge rusher.
So I'm getting rid of him because I can't help it. These are guys that you look at, you go, oh my gosh, what if he's there? We're gonna take him. And we need to remind Jaguar fans, it's not a 4-man front, it's a 3-man front.
Yep.
And your players, your guys that are coming off the edge that are going to make the plays, the outside rushers are going to make the plays.
Right.
Okay.
Right. The defensive ends are going to hold the edge, control the edge, and they're going to be able to come down and be an inside player at times.
Which is what Roy Robertson Harris is expected to be in Jahan Ward, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And oh gosh,
Dewan Smoot. But Dewan Smoot right now is only about 270.
Yeah.
He's going to have to put some weight on.
Right. But he's physical.
Yeah, he is.
So I think they've got some players that can be in that position.
Okay. All right. Anybody we're missing, we'll obviously be able to go through all of this once we know that first day takes place, and then we get through the draft. Then you and I will be able to tear through all of them and get an idea of what they actually got.
Yeah, I think at this point right now, the guys that are going to end up sitting there, I think are going to be, we've discussed. I mean, and it's going to be, to me, it's going to be D-line first, speed guy second, tight end third, whatever that situation is. And if it's a wide receiver, it could be fourth, another guy. But
and I know you're not crazy about the safety, but I still think it's important.
Yeah, and I think a guy like Grant from Wake Forest will be there in the third round, and they may very well take him.
Okay. All right, Coach. Good stuff, man. Always look forward to it. Campo and Joe. We appreciate everybody tuning in on the podcast at 1010XL.com or wherever you find your podcast. Campo and Joe. Have a good one. That should be good.
All right.
We went long there. Oh, actually, maybe we didn't. See what we came up with here. The Q.
Here's who I think they're gonna pick out of that, number 25.
Yeah, who?
Here's the guys that are gonna be either ahead of them or right there.
Right,
Morig,
okay.
Tony, Barmore, Jenkins, if he slips,
Mm-hmm.
Phillips.
Can Jenkins play inside to start and then move outside after Robinson's
Oh,
gone?
yeah, I think he can.
He's a
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
dude.
Phillips,
Okay.
Basham from Wake Forest. He's an edge player. Onu Wazirki.
Yeah, that's
Washington.
Oswu, yeah, from Washington. Oswu Noriki.
Yep. Parsons, the linebacker. Collins, the linebacker. And Farley,
Yeah, Farley's a big question because he had the back
injury.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, those are the guys that are around there that could be there or could not be there. That's why it's so tough to pick.
Yeah, it
Because
ain't
you don't
easy.
know who's gonna be there and who's not gonna
No,
be there.
it ain't easy at all.
Yeah.
All right, so here's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah,
So I have to be off Friday because I got to
Okay.
go to the golf village,
yeah,
and we're doing the show at Eagle Harbor.
yeah. Where is that? I don't know
Way
where
the
that
hell
is.
over there.
Huh?
It's way the hell over there. It's
Oh.
basically you cross the Buckman, or
Oh, yeah, is that on the other, it's the other side
Yeah.
of the intercoastal?
yeah, and if you other side of St. John's.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you were to come from Nocatee.
No, I got no problem with that. That's not an issue. What
but
do you want me to do?
You might Google, because you might be able to come over the Trout Bridge from Green Cove side.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, what I think is gonna have to happen, I'm gonna talk to Tom, and since I have to miss, I'm trying to help them. I feel like crap because I gotta leave, and
Yeah.
one of our guys at the golf village had a death in the family, so they
Oh.
asked me to work.
Okay.
And so anyway, if you could be there to react to the draft, it would be awesome. Then Leon yesterday said that he's supposed to go do a deposition for the concussion thing in Orlando. He kind of dropped it on us that he had to, that was the appointment was Friday. And I'm like, Leon, I said, is there any way you can move it? I said, if you can't, I understand, but it would be really good to have you here. You're our first round draft pick.
Okay, so you want me to be there for the entire show is what you're saying?
Depending on if he can't be there, either half of it or all.
Well, I could be there for the whole thing if you
Yeah,
want me to.
yeah.
It's just, I'm at 9:30, I've got an MRI, which
Right.
usually takes a couple of hours. That's
Right.
the only thing.
And so then I'm thinking, whenever you're done, you could text either me or Hacker and let us know that you're on the way.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, I'm doing the wrong thing here.
Head coach, longtime assistant in the National Football League. Welcome into Campo and Joe.
You
It's
can
a
always
great-
pick it. It's weird how I can always see that that's where it started. Get rid of all of that.
Podcast at 1010XL.com or wherever you find your podcast. Campo and Joe. Have a good one.
Okay. Yeah, we went a little longer, that's still fine. But I think that would be great, just to have you as, a good resource. This is how you think it went down. You obviously would be able to drill down on the Jags, look ahead
Right.
to what we think happens Friday night, and then you could look at the other part. I'm sure Hack will quiz the crap out of you.
Yeah.
What do you think about Dallas? What do you
Yeah.
think about New York? I
So
think that would be
you
good.
don't, so what you're saying is that if I can't get there till 12:30
Yeah.
or 1 o'clock, that's
Yeah.
still good,
I
right?
think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, I'll do
And
it,
then,
sure.
And then what I'm hoping for is that Leon, I'm just hoping that Leon says, that he's gonna be able to make it,
Okay.
is what I'm
What,
hoping.
you want me there if Leon is there or if
Yeah,
Leon
either
is
way.
not there?
Either way.
Oh, either way.
Either way.
Okay, well then
Because
I'll
I
plan
think,
on it.
because I know if nothing else, he's only gonna be there for half the show.
Yeah.
So you being there for the other half would be great.
Okay.
Because, this is how we sell it, this guy's gone through these drafts.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they will love having you on.
Okay.
We knew we were gonna call you no matter what,
Okay.
But then the fact that I kinda got pulled out, I'm like, all right, this may work
So,
out if Coach will be there.
you'll give me the address and everything where you're
Yeah,
at?
because it's Eagle Harbor Country Club.
Okay.
So I'll give you the address.
Oh, I can Google
And
that
then-
if it's
yeah. And
Eagle,
then,
Eagle, what?
Eagle Harbor, I'll text you.
Okay.
Go ahead, and, but I'll be able to text you and let you know it.
Okay,
But,
well, just let me know and I'll plan on it.
Yeah, because